Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Hope everybody's doing well today. Welcome to our budget meeting. I can't believe it. Seems like this comes around every year, because it does. Sorry, that's my joke for the day. But no, thank you for taking some time out of your day today to kind of take a deeper dive look into the 2022 budget that we have upcoming. And so, as normal, we'll walk through a number of things that went into it. But just as a reminder, we'll say this again, you will be receiving your formal notice by Friday. Most likely, Maureen will have it in your mailboxes tomorrow. So, we do, per the contract, offer a 60-day notice. So again, these will go into effect 11/1, these changes. So, let us jump into it. So, what did we do to develop this process? Or what did we do to develop the budget, so to speak? Well, first and foremost, we got together with the leaders of the community, the director team, as well as Lindsay McGoot, the administrator, and myself. And it was really managed by Brad Sitzberger, our director of finance. He was the one that inputted all values, navigated things, kind of dotted the I's and crossed the T's, so to speak. Then this budget was ultimately reviewed by Aaron Donaldson, our Director of Operations Management for Life Care Services. It was reviewed with LCS Financial Services as well, as we did receive support from them. As well as final approval was given by the East Castle Place and Monty's Protestant Home Board of Directors. They are the ones that ultimately approved this budget. The budget was approved, and this is what I have to present to you moving forward. Occupancy. Occupancy assumptions, as you know, is the main revenue driver for East Castle Place, right? You pay monthly fees, we have expenses that you pay for with those monthly fees. And so, again, occupancy is a huge driver, and that's what we look at month in, month out, day in, day out. And so what we assumed for this budget was an average occupancy of 76.3. Again, obviously, this accounts for some changes between the months, from the first quarter to where we're ending in the last quarter. We do have 10 sales budgeted, which is more than last year. Last year we had 8 sales budgeted. We currently have 13 sales year to date, so the sales team and Alandis and the team are doing a fantastic job. We look for that momentum to continue. We also will have some apartments that are already available to the residents beginning October 1st. They're available now, but we'll start accounting for that. So again, we plan for 10 sales in 2022. Assisted living. This is where it gets a little tricky, and I'll just share with you some assumptions that were made, because again, we'll be looking at going through renovations in 2022. Part of that renovations will be in really the last part of the year, or July, August, September, is really looking at those healthcare components and how those change. Because again, as a reminder, we're going from 40 beds down to 20. We're transitioning some residents from the water tower building over to Bradford Terrace when that's complete. So we need to account for some of that, and so we did that in the budget. So 31.5, this year we're right around that 31, 32 mark anyway in assisted living. Then in the health center, again, we just see a slight variance. We had 32 last year, budgeting 29.3. We are accounting for some of that, change in the health center towards the later parts of the month. But then the member support neighborhood, we really look to be remaining stable as that licensure really doesn't change. And so we'll be looking at 15.5. So again, those are the revenue drivers. That is the goal ahead of the team. That is what we have to look forward to and attain. So then this is just more graphical format from assisted living to memory support neighborhood. Again, 32 in the first 3 quarters, and then a slight downturn in 4th quarter as we're preparing for some of those renovations. Then in the health center, that's really where you can see. So first quarter, 1, 2, and 3, we're looking at our historical average of 30. Again, we have 40 occupied available beds, and working with our hospital partners, and working with just all the changes that are still forthcoming. On average this year, we've averaged right around 27 and a half residents in our skilled nursing on a daily basis. We look to bump that number up slightly to 30, just kind of seeing where we're at, seeing some trends that we know we can attain, and so we feel good about the 30 number. And then again, in the fourth quarter is really when we start looking at some of that renovation change. And so the 27.33 is where you start seeing a downturn, so to speak. And then just the census by payer type. So again, we have different payers that come through in the health center. We have private pay, we have Medicare or HMO insurance, UHC, things of that nature, and then we do still have Medicaid that we take on. And you can see the payer sources there, pretty stable in the first, second, and third quarter across the board from HMO of 17 between Medicare and HMO. Private pay, we anticipate 9 for Medicaid. And then we do anticipate looking at our Medicaid population, some of them leaving, and then also from the HMO standpoint, downsizing slightly there. So again, that's the anticipation, that's the assumptions that we worked off of. So again, operating revenue, what do we plan to attain by having the occupancy and charging the rates that we do? You can kind of see it broken up here. And we'll start in the independent living, as that's obviously most prevalent to the crowd. But roughly, you will make up roughly $4.5 million of the operating budget for next year. Again, that's an annualized number. The health center will look to make up just under $4.9 million from an annualized budget standpoint. Assisted living, just over 1.9, just south of $2 million from an operating revenue standpoint. And then again, memory support, our third floor CDRF, just under 1.4 million in total in revenue. So again, total revenues encompassing there are just slightly, getting my notes, just slightly above 12.7 million. Again, that's an annualized budget, right? So that is what we are accounting for, that is what we are budgeting, that's what we're looking to attain. Again, just a different graph, kind of shows you year by year operating revenues. Again, the independent living in 2020, you see we were over 5.1 million in revenue. You see it drop in 2021, and then again in 2022. The big change between 20 and 21, and then again in 21 and 22, is obviously the anticipation for the renovation and expansion program, and that's where the IL rental revenue that was a part of East Castle Place's occupancy and revenue streams is no longer. And so on average, that's roughly $1 million, $1.2 million in revenue that we would anticipate from that rental program. However, in anticipation for the program, and we'll talk a little bit more about the impacts that the renovation and assumptions have on the overall and what we're preparing for in 2022. But again, you can just see why that drop is such. Assisted living, pretty stable. Same piece in memory support. Again, we're missing the goals slightly in 2021, but we're confident with the market and with what we're doing from a marketing standpoint to bump that up and at least hit budget. And then the health center. Again, underperforming slightly this year compared to budget. But again, confidence is high with a new hospital partnership that the Columbia St. Mary's and a pilot program that we'll be doing here in the new year to potentially gain 1 to 2 additional residents per day. Any questions on revenue? Okay.
Speak slowly.
Speak slowly. Thank you for the reminder, Mrs. Crump. 2022 expense assumptions. All right. If you've been here, how many of you, is this your first time in a budget meeting at East Castle? Okay. So, for those of you veterans, I'll say, the main expense driver that is here at East Castle Place is the wages and benefits, the labor portion, the services that are provided to you. That continues to increase. And East Castle Place continues to see that increase in wages. And so we made significant market increases this year that we will carry into next year. And on average, we're looking to still have a 3% increase from a wage standpoint. There are some communities, I know from a state perspective, that the average is 2%. I know some communities, unfortunately, have had to freeze wages, but we still are preparing to offer on an annual basis those 3% incremental, on average, increases to our employees. The biggest change really already occurred, and that was what we call market wage adjustment. That market wage adjustment hit our CNAs and nurses, as I'm sure you can imagine with COVID and just where the labor pool is. We're vying for that best talent. East Castle Place deserves the best. We are a 5-star community in the health center, as well as the other areas. And so that came with a price. And so the board of directors in April offered and approved a market wage adjustment for that area. Another area, as I'm sure you've seen around, is a market wage adjustment for our servers and kitchen staff. We know that there's a number of restaurants and opportunities for servers and kitchen staff to work in. And so again, to remain competitive, an approval was made for a market wage increase in that department as well. We've done market wage adjustments across the board over the course of the last 2 years. Now there's departments that I didn't mention, of course, maintenance and housekeeping and our front desk. I can assure you that they have also been looked at, and they also received market rate adjustments last year, and we'll continue to monitor that. Again, we want to remain competitive, and I believe in working with Jen McHugh, our Human Resources Director, as well as LCS and the resources that we have around us, that we are competitive, and that we do provide a strong environment for our employees. We have a lot of soft costs, or a lot of soft benefits as well. One being that resident scholarship fund that you all we're working through right now with Mike and what you do in the resident treasure chest. Those soft benefits are very important for why employees come to East Castle Place. The other big benefit is you. They love taking care of you, the relationships that they have with you. And again, all of those pieces add into why we have the services we provide, but also B, again, we need to be able to be competitive in the market. But again, we do have a total of 133 full-time employees or full-time equivalents. Essentially, we are still carrying roughly 190 to 200 employees on our payroll at any given time. But what that number is a full-time employee, right? And so that's what it takes to care for East Castle Place residents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, throughout the year. Questions?
Can you tell us how much the percentage of those wage increases were? Were they different for the different departments, and what were they? You know, the budgeted wage increase is 3% average.
Right, and that's for across the community.
Right, and then the department is additional, as I understand it?
The departments received market wage adjustments, so that's outside of 3%.
And how much?
Yes.
We don't know how much that was.
I mean, it was substantial. I can share, it was above 3%, it was above 5%. Any other questions?
And that was for actual increases, not increase in number of staff?
Actual increase.
Every person received that? No.
That was for those department specific. There were departments last year that received market wage adjustments as well. So we are competitive. If a housekeeper or a server or a nurse were to go somewhere else, they would be either below or at the current wage if they left East Castle. Okay. Non-wage, of course, we also do offer benefits to our employees, like health insurance. That was an 11% increase. Again, we're not bearing all of that on the employee by any means. We take on parts of that as the employer. There's general insurance, property liabilities, and so on and so forth. That's up 15%. Utilities are up 5%. And then we're still carrying COVID costs of roughly $60,000. That's for testing, that's for the different things that we need, PPE, for instance, for our staff to make sure everyone is safe. Again, the vaccines are not included in that. The vaccines are given to us, so that is just strictly PPE cost, test cost, so on and so forth. Again, this chart gets pretty busy, so I'm just going to go high level and some of the larger ones. 63% of the expenses are related to the wages and benefits and the taxes that go along with that, and that's roughly $8.4 million. Then there's, obviously food. There's an increase in the overall budget of 4%. You'll see raw food is up higher than that. Utilities, cable, of course, and phone is up roughly 5%, or takes up 5% of the budget. Sorry, these aren't compared to budget. My apologies. This is just part of the overall budget. Professional insurance, 2% of the budget. Management fee and employees of LCS is 6%. The ancillary charges, therapy, supplies, so on and so forth for the different healthcare areas, 1.4 million, or roughly 10%, 3% in marketing, and then just a slew of other departments that make up the rest. So in total, the operating expenses of East Castle Place, in total that we're budgeting is $13.4 million. So again, the expense allocations then, again, you can kind of see that what departments make up the larger areas. So again, you have the dining department making up 1.9, our plant department making up roughly 1.5, environmental services just under $1 million, the health center just under 3.9 million, and then you see the foregoing resident services just over 775,000, assisted living at 700, and then memory support at 834, and then of course general administrative, which again also encompasses the insurance and marketing cost, is just under $3 million. Again, the grand total of that is $13,412,000. So what does the operating budget look like, right? So you take all the revenues that we talked about. Again, 4.5, 4.8, you see the numbers there. In total, the operating revenue is roughly $12.8 million, give or take. Again, we gotta take some. The operating expenses are 13.4. So again, our revenues do not equal our expenses. So our net operating income for the year that we budgeted is a negative $680,000. Okay? Usually you see that as a positive number, right? That's what everybody wants. Even in the non-profit world, you want to see that. But at the same time, the next slide that I'll share with you guys goes through capital expenditures. This is expected, right? We know we're going through a major transition here at the community, right? We know that there's residents that have left. We know that there's, extended work to be had, and we'll talk a little bit about that in about 2 slides. But again, this is expected. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the banking and what that relationship looks like and what they're expecting. But I want you not to walk out of here saying that East Castle Place is going bankrupt because we have a negative NOI. I assure you we are not. I assure you we are still very, very, very financially stable. A couple of things that, again, just impact some of what we're doing from a capital expenditures standpoint that also get rolled into this budget. We need a new pool filter. We have a needs to be retired Dodge Ram truck for snow plowing, so we'll be replacing that. That truck has been on its last leg since I've been here, so we're going to look to actually replace that. We'll continue the tuck pointing in the historic building that is needed and continuing maintenance. Of course, with a new chef, we have some new kitchen equipment that we want to plan for, as well as replacement, and then a replacement for air conditioning units in your units. Again, fortunately, at the hands of Eric and our maintenance team, we're able to bring a lot of that cost in-house from a labor standpoint, but the actual mechanical and physical function of the equipment, there's cost to, and that's north of $500, which is a capital expenditure. So again, I just want to talk briefly about the impact of the upcoming renovations and expansion. So as we talked about, there was a revenue source that is no longer budgeted for. That's in our rental agreement that the board of directors made the decision to go forward without offering any new rental agreements due to the upcoming expansion and renovations. I can assure you our bank, First Midwest, that we've been partners with since 2015, is aware of the NOI shortfall, as this was strategic by the board of directors, as well as East Castle Place operations. So again, we've been transparent with our bank throughout this process as well. There's covenants that any business like ours has to meet. We do meet all of the covenant requirements, even with the numbers I'm sharing with you, which is good. It's a little tighter than we've ever been. But again, First Midwest and the relationship that we have, know this is a strategic step that we needed to take in order to continue East Castle Place in the future. And again, in 2022, we will be going through a construction budget as well as potential refinancing. And again, all that is going to be in the works here at the first part of next year. And again, we have pro formas. We are working with consultants in our bank, and again, feel very, very confident in that process and what we're doing. But again, that's all aside from this budget, right? That's all, the budget that you just saw and that I just presented is for you. It's for the operations of East Castle Place and the services provided in 2022. All right, any questions on that? Also, I forgot to mention, this budget will be available to everyone in the library, and if you want a copy yourself, please feel free to reach out to myself or Maureen. I'm happy to share this budget with you. All right, the dining program. We made a change in 2021. We went to a point system, right? We went away from the 1 meal per day to a point system. We're changing that program slightly, and there's a couple reasons why. Beginning November 1st, again, you will have 2 options to dine at East Castle Place. The first one is what we're calling the standard program. It's what we expect, the majority of residents to be a part of. That gets 600 points. That 600 points allows you to dine essentially however you would like. The data's been interesting. We've seen a lot of that data from the POS system and the utilization by you as residents. And I know that we had 650 points to begin with. And I know that everybody's going to equate that to $50, right? That's the equation that everybody makes. That's not necessarily the case, as your monthly service fees encompasses 600 points, 1 meal a day, a program, right? We're still providing that program, and I can assure you, you will still be able to dine at least 1 time a night, however you want. In most cases, you'll be able to have lunch and dinner, even with that 600. I also know that some residents don't dine as often, and so there's left a lot of points on the table are left. And so we want to offer you, if you want to dine that way because you go out to dinner and you like to cook for yourself, you can receive a $50 discount per month off of your monthly fee. Okay? I know you're going to equate that, say, Tyler, you're taking 400 points, you're taking 200 points away, and you're only giving me $50. Well, there is cost of overhead and there's cost for providing meals. Again, it's the right size of the program. And my goal is to not have to touch this ever again so that we can move forward in the best manner possible. And again, I know that there's going to be questions that come up, and I'll take those questions, but I just want you to know that this type of two-tier program, this type of discount is pretty standard in the senior living world. I didn't necessarily pull this by myself. There's a number of resources I have, and again, it's not dollar for dollar. It's not even necessarily 50 cents on the dollar when there's a discount. It's for those residents that, again, looking at the data, I know that the average utilization is 450 points. 90% of you are using 450 points. So again, that's where that decision can be made. The other change we made is the $10 went from $8 to $10 from a discount standpoint. And so if you are not at East Castle Place for the consecutive days, instead of receiving that $8 benefit, you'll receive 10. And so again, trying to help meet in the middle. And so again, you will, in your monthly service fee letter that you will receive, you'll receive a memo that looks similar to this. Actually, it will be this memo. Highlighting and sharing with you kind of the two programs. On the back side, you will also have the opportunity to fill out which one you want. If you want to stay at the 600, you don't have to do anything. You can fill it out, put it back at the front desk. If you want to go down to that 400-point program, you will have to fill this out by September 30th. It goes into effect November 1st. That gives us some time. This is giving you the opportunity to talk through it and think about the options, look at the menu, talk with Carlos or Mary or myself, and then make the decision. And then we will input that into the system, and beginning November 1st is when you receive that $50 discount. That's also when the $10 a month meal program, $10 a month credit goes into would go into effect as well. So before I take the questions regarding the food and beverage program or the dining program, I'll share with you the last slide, right? What's the monthly fee increase? And so, again, we know that there's increased expenses, there's increased decrease in revenue. So what did the board of directors and what we talked about look at? We're still looking at a 3% increase. And so that remains standard for what we've done historically and what actually we expect as costs continue. And I know that there's a number of things that affect this, but in talking with the board of directors, they didn't feel that a 4%, 5% increase was going to be necessary because of the changes that were made. And so they decided to keep it at 3%. The assisted living and memory support private pay rate also went up 3%. You'll see the health center rate went up 1%. The 1% increase in the health center, we're at the top of the market. In all of this, we know we have to remain competitive with St. John's, Catholic Home, St. Queen Square, all of the communities, Newcastle Place, so on and so forth. And so by staying at 3%, we know that we remain competitive. In the health center, the creep was really getting there. And so 1% increase actually resulted still in roughly a $6 a day increase. And so that daily rate for the health center is roughly $426. But again, that is the what you can look for in your in the letter that you'll be receiving in your mailbox by most likely tomorrow is my assumption, Lorraine. And again, that is historically what East Castle Place and the board of directors has seen throughout the last 3-4 years. My first year here was 3.5%. So with that, now I will open it up to any questions. Again, a copy of this will be placed in the library. I'm happy to send this copy to you as well. And again, you know that my door is always open. I'm happy to discuss any of this further with you. There are certain things that I'm not going to be able to share with you. Again, there's detail and operational things that, running a business, that's, again, it's not that I'm trying to hide anything. It's purely that there's just a lot more than just a number that goes into it. And so again, there's different strategies and different conversations that happen. So again, I hope you saw the transparency that I wanted to share with you. you saw the numbers, that is what the board of directors saw as well. Again, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to get there. So huge credit to Brad and the director team for walking through all this. But with all that being said, what questions can I answer?
In healthcare and memory, how do you define private payer?
So the question was, how do you define private pay? And so again, you as residents receive a $1,000 discount for up to 60 months. And so that is off the private pay rate. And so that is how the private pay rate is determined. Does that answer your
Well,
question?
no, I mean, this is just kind of a personal one.
Yeah.
But I pay,
Mhm.
but I have long-term insurance,
Mhm.
which I have to send in for. Am I private pay?
Yes, you would be listed as private pay.
I'm
Yeah,
used to writing a check.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the question was, is if you have a loved one in the health center, you yourself in the health center, are you considered private pay? When we look at it, yes, technically you go into that private pay pool, and then there's a discount off that private pay rate. And again, we'll work with you to make sure that your long-term care insurance receives the most up-to-date rates, so that you get the maximum reimbursement that is allowed. So again, you'll see that, that'll come out on the monthly bills.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What other questions? Yes, Mr. Kelly.
Could you go over what the different rates are? Apparently there's a private pay rate and what, a Medicare rate, or what other rates are?
Sure. So the question was, can you go over the private pay rates? Private pay in assisted living is everyone. We don't accept state-funded insurance in assisted living or memory support. That the average cost for an assisted living apartment, we have 3 different styles, is roughly $5,600, Brad?
Yes.
Roughly $5,600, that's the private pay rate, right? There is no supplemental or state insurance that's received. In the health center, when we speak about private pay, that means strictly you're paying out of pocket privately. That rate is $426. When we talk about Medicare and managed care, Medicare is something that the government pays us. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services pays East Castle Place for the services that you, or really anybody that has that insurance that services us, reimburses. That rate is higher than that 426, but there's a lot more costs associated with that's captured within that. So again, we work with margins on the HMO, which HMO is really United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, anything that's not Medicare. Then we also do have
Say that
Medicaid.
again, please.
So we have Medicare. That is the federal government program that I'm sure many of you have. Medicare Part A. We have a margin, essentially, because we anticipate an average reimbursement rate, but it differs on patient to patient. And so then we look at the therapy costs, labor costs, so on and so forth, and we work off of a margin, so to speak. But we do get reimbursed at an average daily rate. HMO is third-party insurance, so United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, AARP, Network Health. That's instead of Medicare. They reimburse differently, their costs are different, and so we work with a margin on that as well. Then we also have a Medicaid rate, that's the state-funded program. That is something that we monitor, and again, that's reimbursed at, for those that have assets roughly under, I think it's $2,000, and their monthly income is less than $200, $300. So again, it is, the Medicaid rate is the state program that we also participate in. Again, we average roughly 4 residents that we receive payment for. Does that help?
Todd?
Yes.
You have to have a qualified hospital stay for Medicare and HMO. That's the biggest difference.
Yes. Thank you, Brad. I probably could have cleared some of this up. So in order to qualify for Medicare and United Healthcare, there is a hospital stay and a certain requirement that happens. They don't just pay for you to live in the health center. There's certain metrics. Otherwise, you would fall into that private pay rate. We have residents that come to us from the hospital or from the community that just need 24-hour days, 7 days a week acute care, and so they pay a private pay rate right from the get-go. Does that answer the question? It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a little bit of an answer to a big question.
My door is always open, and
Yes.
please feel free to stop in.
I
I'm
shall.
happy to have the conversation. What other questions might I be able to answer? Barb?
Being gone from here for, it used to be 15 days, it's now 14 days, right?
Correct.
Okay. Say we're going to be gone 12, it says consecutive, I saw that.
Yep.
Say we're gone 12 days, can we just lay low and use no facilities for 2 days to constitute our 14th? Can we vacation under our roof? Seriously.
The question was, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to chuckle. I don't mean to chuckle. But the question was, if we're gone for 12 days or 10 days, can we lay low and not utilize any services of East Castle Place and account for 14 days and then get reimbursed with $10? That's called working the system. No, I'm just kidding. I'll talk to Brad. That's interesting. I guess you caught me off guard. I'll also go back. I'll have an answer for you specifically if more interested. I may.
That was hypothetical.
Hypothetical, of course, hypothetical. So.
That may be hard to track.
Right. The tracking piece is where we get caught. What other questions? Mr. Burke?
Could you summarize what you've been telling us about in terms of the advantages of what these changes are for us, and also what the expenses are for us?
I'm going to break that. I may need more information because the advantages, I guess, as a whole of living in East Castle Place.
Well, I would say this, I would say you're only receiving a 3% increase, even though our expenses have gone up much more than that because of all the market rate increases that we had to give with the rising healthcare costs are much more than it has been over the last few years. So we're pleased to only have to tell you that it's a 3% increase other than 4, 5, or 6% on your monthly billing statement. I don't know if you wanted to.
Sure. So just so I know Brad was a little muffled, what I think the question was is what's the benefit of versus the expense of the 3% increase. To Brad's point, the board of directors saw that a 3% increase, even given the expenses, was the right thing to do. And so even though a board of directors could have justified with the rising healthcare costs, with what the labor market has been doing, with just the overall increase in expenses, there's communities, and I can share with you LCS communities that on average are doing 4% this year as opposed to their normal 3%. Again, I'm just speaking to LCS, but again, the board of directors saw, the expenses, which obviously have risen dramatically. This was the most dramatic year of expenses, and they still saw it only right to pass along 3% fee increases because of the vision that they have in the long-term goals of East Castle Place and what's coming down the pipeline. And so that's why the decision was made. So the benefit is they passed along at 3%. The expenses probably justified more in the 5 to 6% range. And so again, They did what they felt was right in what was recommended, and we moved forward with it. Now, of course, the benefits of that by increasing those expenses, primarily in the wages, is we are getting, better talent, more engaged employees, and trying to retain the top tier talent so that leans into the services that are provided to you, increasing that quality of service and life overall for you. So that's what I would say is the benefits versus, I guess, to your question, Ms. Brooke, the expenses. Does that answer it?
The other question is, how does this compare in terms of previous years? In other words, how big an increase are these expenses?
So, that may require Brad to do some calculations. Yeah, give one moment on that. Year over year has been 3%, as we've said, but comparatively to budget, the increased expense is probably at least north of 6. Brad's doing some quick calculations. I apologize, Mr. Burke, that I didn't have this prepared. I guess,
Budget, it's at least 5%.
yeah, budget.
It's more than that to project it.
Right, so from 2020 to 2021, there's at least a 5% increase from budget to budget.
So how does this compare with looking at the annual kind of increases that we've had historically to this very one that we're looking at for this year?
So historically, it's been 3%. In 2000,
3%?
so yes, in 2017, my first year, I could never forget it. I came here in October and I told you all that you'd be getting a 3.5%. That was the first time in some time that you went over 3%. In 2018, the board of directors approved a 3%. In 2019, it was a 3% increase. In 2020, it was a 3% increase. In 2021, it was, I guess, budget year, a year late. It was a 3% increase, and now this year is also 3%.
So my question is, it appears what you're doing this year is enormous in terms of increasing our expenses.
Well, it's,
The community is
we're
experiencing.
bearing expenses, the company. We're bearing more of the expense. It's above 5% increase from budget to budget, but we're keeping your increase only at 3%.
So that remains consistent.
For the monthly fee increases, yes, but our expenses that the company's bearing have gone up, so we're taking on more of the burden.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry to ask so many questions, but I'm a little confused about, first of all, I think you showed us in the expected income, there is less money in the year coming up because there is no rental income. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, where, if any place, are you showing any increased revenue for the new apartments or for the increase in,
Occupancy.
occupancy in the health programs?
So the question was, where are we accounting for the new residents and the new money, so to speak, to come to East Castle Place? We don't anticipate that to happen until 2023. Because the project begins April of 2022. The apartments aren't going to be built and ready until probably early to mid 2023. This budget goes from 10/1 of 2021 to 9/30 of 2022. So next year, we'll be in the throes of renovation. Hopefully this will maybe be done. When I say this, Lindsay Hall. And we will then look at the budget for 2023 in bringing on those apartments, because again, we can't charge residents a monthly service fee, which again, this is all just monthly service fees. This doesn't account for any of those entrance fee dollars until the apartments are ready and we have occupants in those apartments. As far as the healthcare portion, we're actually decreasing the healthcare census, therefore decreasing the healthcare revenue. That is strategic because, again, with that decreases expenses as well, to a degree, just in the ancillaries and therapies and things of that nature. So again, that offset of revenue will offset slightly by expenses. And we see a little bit of that in Q4 or in July, August, and September. But that doesn't really impact this budget significantly. Does that answer your question?
It sort of answers the question. Yes.
The bigger question is, what happens when those new people come? What does that do to our entrance fees or our monthly service fees? And that's all in what we call a pro forma, a 10-year cash flow that we project out, and we figure out we'll be stable in 2024 with 90% occupancy. And what does that look like? And that's what the banks all will finance this project out. And so I can tell you just from the initial pro formas, it works. We wouldn't have gone forward with this back in April if we didn't know that piece.
So, excuse me, going forward, everything is going to continue to be just all together, I guess you would say?
Correct.
And there's not really anything that shows us how much we are paying, for example, of the increased cost. You've said that the company is taking on X dollars of this deficit, but the deficit is really generated, at least in some part, but it's hard for me anyway to figure out how much, by the new plan that's coming into effect. Namely, at this point at least, there's no income from rental units.
When we were talking budget year to budget year before, we were strictly talking about expenses. The 5% above that increase in expenses, we weren't including the loss of revenue at all. So it's actually much more of an impact to East Castle Place than just the increase of 5% on the expense side. With the loss of revenue, then you're getting into, double digits percentage, loss on. But this is part of a transition year. This year, the next year will be a transition year too.
Yep.
We have significant reserves, unrestricted cash that we can rely on. We're still going to be very close to cash flow positive, believe it or not, even with that NOI at a negative, because there's entrance fees that come in. And so, like he said before, we're in a very strong position. What the banks look at, like their credit department looks at, our days cash on hand is over 600 days. The requirement from the bank is 120. That's how much cash we have.
So that was a lot of financial information that Brad shared with you. I'm not going to try and reiterate all of that, but to Brad's point, the 5% is strictly just looking at expenses. Last year, we had a positive budgeted NOI of roughly $700,000 to $800,000. So it's about a $1.4 million swing that we saw from last year's budget to this year's budget. And so in order to get back to that positive NOI, the increases would have been astronomical, which would have made 0 sense. So obviously that wasn't even entertained. Because again, we know, as Brad said, this is a transition year. The bank that we're working with, First Midwest, knows that. Brad says the reserves that we have to continue to be very, very financially strong as an organization remain well intact. And so again, I'm very confident, even unfortunately with this NOI, the way it looks, this was anticipated. Again, the board anticipated this. Brad and I did the board presentation yesterday, and again, the board was fully informed. They still move forward with the 3%. There wasn't even, they said that's what the right thing to do is. There's no reason why residents should have to bear the brunt, so to speak, of these transition type years. And that's why, again, they did the right thing. And I think that's why I'm so grateful for the board of directors and for the support that they provide to East Castle Place and the organization, because they did the right thing. And again, we'll work through this. Again, trust me, if this number continues for a long time, we have some problems, but we don't ever anticipate that. We anticipate this and next year to be really those 2 transition years. And again, I'm not going to be calling it a transition, I'm calling it a transformation. Because again, East Castle Place will look different in 2 years. Again, not different than the feel that we have today in that sense, but more so where healthcare is provided, in the new neighbors we're bringing, in some of the amenities that we're able to provide. But again, that's all part of this. And so again, that 3% increase is the reason, or is what we will be moving forward with. What other questions? Okay, well, if there aren't any, again, look for a letter in your mailbox, probably in an envelope, because there will be a couple attachments, couple ancillary charges, things of that nature that may have shifted slightly. We are offering underground parking to guests now. There's 3 spots available, that's $10 a day. So again, just different things that we want to make available to you. And if there's questions, once you receive those letters, by all means, let me know. Again, you do have, this goes into effect November 1st. With that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And please, again, this will be in the library. And again, if you need a copy, Maureen, myself, and again, if you have questions regarding this, stop down. I'd love to chat with you about it. Thanks, everybody.
Session.